I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE, a global center of excellence for geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Learn how you can put geopolitics to work for your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to this episode of RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. I'm Emma Kami, and today I'll be speaking with RANE's Eurasia analyst, Matthew Orr, about the 2024 outlook for the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Hi, Matthew. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Emma. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what, to start us off, is the state of play right now at the beginning of the year for the conflict?
Yeah, so basically the Ukrainians had plans for a big offensive last year in 2023. That offensive kicked off at the beginning of last summer, but really it very quickly fell behind its plans, and essentially already on the fourth night of that offensive, the Ukrainians fundamentally altered the plan and really did not go through with any sort of major armored breakthrough attempts. And then they continued to try to take ground in southern Ukraine along the so-called Melitopol axis down there by Tokmak and Orikhiv. But really it was clear that any gains down there were going to be incremental. That being said, they pushed ahead. They preserved a lot of the equipment that was really earmarked for that offensive. But on the other hand, they continued to use large amounts of the standard equipment you would use for an offensive, things like artillery ammunition. And that offensive really petered out by this November and really made only a small pocket south of Orikhiv by Robitnya that is still vulnerable and obviously well short of what the Ukrainians and many in the West expected. Right as the Ukrainian offensive was culminating, we saw the Russians start an offensive of their own. It was really on two axes, up by Kupiansk in the north and then around Avdiivka. The really more notable of these attacks is this Russian offensive around Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a stronghold that has been on the front line between Russian and Ukrainian forces all the way back to the original Donbass conflict starting in 2014. And it's a suburb of Donetsk that the Ukrainians have been fortifying for years. And so the Russians, right, seeing that the Ukrainians were beginning to lose force, they decided to launch an offensive of their own, and it's gone a long way in encircling Avdiivka. It didn't fully cut off the city, and now it looks like that Russian offensive has also itself culminated and didn't fully encircle the city, but it's made it quite vulnerable. And having to withdraw from Avdiivka would be a very substantial blow to Ukrainian forces, because they would essentially be, again, retreating from a place that's much more fortified, with things like concrete bunkers and well dug out tunnels and fortifications, to other positions that they have not been fortifying for nearly as long. So that's kind of where we are right now. The other thing that's definitely important to note at the beginning of this year is that the fundamental material advantages have begun to shift back in Russia's favor. There was a brief period during the Ukrainian offensive when it looked like they probably achieved a daily artillery ammunition use advantage, but that period appears to have completely passed, and now the Russians are by a factor of multiple times again using much more artillery ammo than the Ukrainians, so really able to suppress Ukrainian forces constantly. And then on top of that, probably even more notable than artillery ammunition, the Russians now have an advantage in these FPV drones, according to some numerous ways that this has been kind of figured out and calculated. But basically now the Russians have more of these cheap drones along their frontline forces, which they can use to strike individual Ukrainian soldiers, of course, Ukrainian equipment. And so that's another kind of really concrete material advantage that the Russians now appear to have and appear unlikely to quickly lose, that really positions them well going into 2024.
If you can expand on that a little bit, with the start of a new year, there are a lot of forces that will be at play, notably a Russian election, which will mean a continued Putin presidency. What will Russia's goals be in 2024 in this conflict, and what are their constraints to achieving those goals?
Yeah, so for the Russians, I mean, what's kind of, on their side is that they don't have super pressing goals at this point, right? I mean, they have taken a lot of the Ukrainian territory that they need to easily call the war a victory. And now, moreover, they are ramping up their military industrial complex, believing that they can again, use the advantage that they already have materially over Ukrainian forces, not to mention the manpower advantage, right? What they're able to mobilize. And they're sitting back and watching political developments in the West and seeing that basically everything's developing in their favor. They're seeing infighting in the West. They're seeing war fatigue, particularly in the United States. Inability to significantly ramp up production of key systems to support the Ukrainians. And so they're thinking that this is on a trajectory where basically, even if the Ukrainians aren't forced into some sort of negotiation this year, that these developments will only continue to build over the course of 2024. The narrative will simply be that, oh, look, it's us actually who's continuing to take small amounts of territory. And therefore, right, continued Western support for Ukraine is ineffective and unnecessary. And of course, the Russians, as you mentioned, there's an election, a so-called election in Russia. On the other hand, Putin's going to obviously be reelected, and right, they're going to be able to demonstrate complete, the alleged kind of infragility of their regime and unity and so forth. And basically be able to say that, right, we feel well positioned to win this war of attrition against the West and the Ukrainians. You guys aren't willing to pay the necessary price. And so, yeah, I think that they don't have a particularly big territorial goal. That being said, they absolutely are going to, as we mentioned to your previous question, they are going to continue to attempt to take ground all along the front, particularly the kind of the northeastern parts of the front, the former line of contact in Donbass, the northern kind of Kharkiv area of the front. There we're going to see Russian forces try to make these small-scale kind of encirclements, just like the Russian offensive in 2023 around Bakhmut, what's going on in Avdiivka, continued attacks on Kupiansk, even potentially new places like New York. The Russians are going to try to take ground and encircle these places where the Ukrainians have been beginning to fortify themselves. So yeah, I mean the biggest constraint for Russia actually is really is not so much material as economic and kind of manpower related. They would like to get more soldiers onto the front line so that they can rotate some of their soldiers out, right? Have much fresher personnel, reduce some of this political tension that exists in Russia related to the mobilized soldiers and their inability to have any sort of leave, etc. On the other hand, they might not even want them or feel it's really that necessary for them to have a leave, just because they don't want all these soldiers, right, going back to Russia and telling, bad stories about how tough and difficult it is there. But on the other hand, right, especially after Putin's election, he'll be in this position where he'll certainly signal to the West that he's unconstrained from, continued mobilization, continued volunteer campaign. And the threat that the Russians will be trying to kind of hint at is that, unless the Ukrainians are dealing tens of thousands of casualties to the Russians, every year, probably even more like hundreds, then the Russians will be able to say, oh, we can actually continue to replace this manpower. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, Russia's goal for 2024 is really to continue to make small gains on the front while continuing to signal that they're prepared for a long-term war of attrition in which they'll have advantages, and really focusing on fueling this war fatigue in the West.
And can you talk about what Ukraine's goals will be, both as of now and as they respond to Russia's strategy for this year? And how likely will it be for Ukraine to achieve these goals that they set out to accomplish?
Yeah, I think Ukraine's goal for 2024 is really to preserve their manpower, preserve their resources, while dealing disproportionate damage to the Russian forces. Right? I think the Ukrainians are, rather correctly surmising that creating some sort of large-scale breakthrough, like happened already during this war around Kharkiv, or what was hoped would happen in 2023 with regards to southern Ukraine, right? That something like that is quite unlikely, mainly because there's not enough of basic capabilities like artillery ammunition, right? So the Ukrainians really need to focus this year on, again, as I said, preserving their resources, realizing that amid this malaise in this West and kind of this inability to grasp the strategic weight of this moment and the implications of a Russian victory in Ukraine, they actually need to preserve what they have and think about how, okay, even if it's not this next year in 2024, then maybe we can return to a more decisive after degrading Russian forces when the West, right, if political winds change in the West, if this period largely passes of infighting over Ukraine support, then we can be in a position to, right, increase pressure on the Russians at a time when maybe right, their economy's in a worse state or they're less able to mobilize, things like that. So yeah, I think that the Ukrainians are their goal, or how they're going to achieve that is in a strangely somewhat similar to the Russians. The Ukrainians also might attempt some very small scale offensives. I think mainly in, again, also eastern Ukraine, maybe the central Donetsk region around Bakhmut, or small areas where they can go to their Western partners and say, look, we're continuing to gain ground, we're not losing ground, we're dealing disproportionate damage to Russian forces, but largely again preserving what they have and really trying to signal that nope, we're still here, and as long as war fatigue doesn't continue to grow in the West, then we'll be able to effectively continue resisting the Russians going forward. We just need the West to really, again, grasp the importance of this moment. And around the time, for example, of the NATO summit in Washington in July of this year, make much more decisive decisions about ramping up production and making long-term security commitments in Ukraine in all kinds of form, both the political form, but also, of course, the military material form. So I think that's really going to be their focus, and I think that it's important for them to be clear about that. Just because, fortunately, unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, in the West, a lot of this opinion. I mean, if you look at polling, it shows that support for Ukraine remains quite high and quite stable. The problem is that the intensity and the interest, right, amid other crises around the world has somewhat fallen. And then the other thing going on is that there is a little bit more of this skepticism about how Ukraine thinks it can win the conflict, because Western audiences they're less interested in whether or not something is actually in their interests, and more interested in this idea of the side that we're supporting gaining some sort of decisive victory. Because of that, I mean, this word, or this idea of vision for victory is going to be important. And I think that the Ukrainians, are going to have to become more clear-eyed about that, both domestically and on the international stage. And if they do that, I think that they can continue to receive the support they need to continue resisting the Russians. But if they don't, right, if political winds in the West don't go in that direction, or if we see strong signs that the West actually wants to pressure Ukraine into to essentially capitulate to Russian demands for a ceasefire, then I mean that could happen probably around the very end of this year, and then then we could see the start of some sort of negotiation with Russia maybe in 2025. I think that's what Russia is looking at. And probably considers its baseline or most likely scenario at this point. But war is a very unpredictable and highly contingent field, and so a lot remains to be seen, and a lot is really a political decision in the hands of the West, right? How much are they really willing to pump up production? When are they willing to make those investments? etc. So it's going to be a really grueling, decisive year in the war, even if ground doesn't change that much. I think that due to these political dynamics and due to the way that the nature of the war has shifted in 2024 versus 2023, that it's still going to shape up to be a year that analysts consider to be decisive with regards to its trajectory.
Thanks, Matt. Just one final question, kind of going off of what you were mentioning with a lot of the military side of things. Can you speak to the impact of U.S. presidential outcomes given Biden and Trump's vastly different approaches to involvement in this conflict? How crucial of a role does U.S. leadership play in the trajectory of the war?
U.S. leadership is absolutely essential, right? The Europeans, both on the financial side and on the military side, can't replace the United States. For just as one obvious example, the Ukrainians don't make nearly enough of the artillery ammunition needed to allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves, right? So if the U.S. stopped supplying that ammunition, hypothetically under, for example, a Trump administration, this would be in 2025. But yeah, I mean that could force Ukraine to capitulate to Russian terms in a matter of months, probably. So again, we don't know. We don't have a very good grasp, or we certainly know the directionality that a Trump administration or a completely Republican-run Congress would take, which would be essentially dieting the Ukrainians, in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, kind of going cold turkey on them and seeing what happens and seeing how the Europeans react. But yeah, either of those scenarios would very rapidly lead to the Ukrainians capitulating to Russian terms, and at some point, probably by the end of 2025 or maybe 2026. On the other hand, right, if we see Biden reelected, or if we see the Democrats, keep their position in Congress, or maybe even retake control of the House, then we could get in a position where you get people of very different views kind of in office who really think that actually it's our military-industrial complex, right, our GDP of the West that's something like 25 times larger than Russia's, that if we just mobilize sufficiently, then we can again put the Ukrainians back in a position to deal a decisive blow to the Russian army, and eventually get the Russians to be prepared for a real negotiation, right? Not essentially a capitulation to Putin's demands. So yeah, I mean, political developments in the West absolutely are decisive, and we know for a fact that the Kremlin is watching them very closely.
Well, we'll definitely be on the lookout for updates from you as this develops. Again, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights, Matthew. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You can read more of Matthew's analyses by subscribing to our geopolitical intelligence product, RANE Worldview. Our suite of risk products allow clients to access the insights and analyses they need to make more informed decisions. You can sign up or learn more at our website, ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emma Kami. Thanks for listening.